Hello, bonjour. Good afternoon to everyone at home. Welcome from the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. We have a very special program to share today. I'm Angeliki Boyatsi, interpretive program developer with the public programs team here at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The museum is located on ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory. The Red River Valley is also the birthplace of the Métis. We acknowledge with gratitude that the water in the museum is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. It is a privilege to connect with you for our virtual program today. We are honored to present Memories of the Warsaw Ghetto, a film screening and discussion to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day and the 80th anniversary of the sealing of the Warsaw Ghetto. The film is in English and American Sign Language with the English captions. The discussions will be held in English with French and American Sign Language interpretation. To access the French language, you can click on the interpretation function, which is available in the menu bar on the bottom of your screen. ASL interpreters will be visible on your screen as Joe sees right now. At CMHR, we are committed to engaging our audiences in respectful dialogue by providing a safe space for all. We welcome your participation with your comments and questions. After the presentations, we will have time for a question and answer session. You can use the Q&A function to send your questions for our presenter and moderator. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. We ask that you stay on topic and be respectful of others as if you were having a face-to-face discussion. Thank you for respecting the rights, differences, and opinions of others. Now, let me introduce Clint Curl. Clint is Vice President, Exhibitions, Curation, and Partnerships at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Before joining the museum, Clint was Professor at Carleton University, Director of a non-governmental organization in international development, and a pastor. He holds degrees in law and theology and a doctorate in political science. Clint?
Thank you, Angeliki. Together with the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada, we're pleased to mark Holocaust Remembrance Day with you. This Day of Remembrance is commemorated annually by the United Nations on today, January 27th, which is the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. It's a global day of memorialization for the victims of the Holocaust, and each year, Canadians and individuals all over the world take this opportunity to remember the victims of the atrocities of the Holocaust and reflect on the continuing reality of anti-Semitism today. As we begin our program, it's good for us to be specific about what we're remembering when we remember the Holocaust. Over 6 million Jews, children and women and men were murdered by Nazi Germany and its collaborators before and during the Second World War. A parallel genocide was committed by the same perpetrator groups against the Roma. And there were targeted attacks against additional communities such as gay men, persons of different abilities, religious dissenters, and many more groups besides. The perpetrators of the Holocaust intended to erase the Jewish people from memory. And to that genocidal intent, we say a resounding no. And by participating in this virtual event today, each of you is saying your own no to that genocidal intent. On the contrary, we remember. We remember the victims of the Holocaust. We remember those who survived the Holocaust. And we stand together today and say our no to anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination. And with that no, there's also a yes. Today, we affirm that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. It's my pleasure to introduce Israeli Consul General to Canada, Galit Baram. Consul General Bahram joined the Israeli Foreign Service in 1994. Her service abroad includes postings to Moscow, Cairo, and Washington, D.C. She also served as director of the Department of Palestinian Affairs and Regional Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jerusalem. Ms. Bahram took up her current position as Consul General of Israel to Toronto and Western Canada in August of 2016. She's married to a fellow diplomat and has 2 children. We turn now to Consul General Galit Bahram.
Shalom. Hello. Today, January 27th, we mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day. On that day, in 1945, Auschwitz death camp, which was built in Poland by the Nazis and their collaborators, was liberated by the Soviet army. 1.2 million people entered its gates, mostly Jews, many children among them. 90% of them were murdered upon arrival. This day commemorates the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust, as well as 11 million others who were killed by the Nazis and their collaborators. A resolution commemorating this day was designated by the United Nations General Assembly in 2005. Not many people know that it was an Israeli initiative, a result of the understanding that the Holocaust should be a lesson, a warning sign for all humanity to see. The Israeli initiative was supported by the United States and by Canada, as well as by Australia, European Union member states, and Russia. On November 1st, 2005, the resolution was unanimously adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. The memory of the dead, the recognition of the lost lives, the lost potential and talent should unite the international community in the commitment to do good, to do justice. This must stand above any political differences. This philosophy led to the adoption of the resolution in the first place. But now, 76 years after the end of World War II, 16 years since the adoption of the resolution, we're still witnessing an alarming resurgence of anti-Semitism around the world. It is manifested in the desecration of Jewish cemeteries, in physical attacks of Jews, in slurs, insults, offensive cartoons in newspapers, Holocaust denial, incitement, offensive salutes, swastika graffiti, Nazi propaganda that is freely available on the internet and on bookshelves in some parts of the world, terror attacks in synagogues, and even blood libels, especially these days of a global pandemic, as if the world has learned nothing. Eradicating this phenomenon could be achieved only by full governmental commitment, legal steps, and education. The State of Israel is grateful to governments around the world, including the Canadian government, for their strong condemnation of anti-Semitism and all forms of racism. The Canadian Museum for Human Rights, as well as Holocaust Remembrance museums around the country and many non-governmental organizations, provide an excellent example of how educators and scholars unite in the fight against anti-Semitism, racism, and xenophobia. Education has the power to raise awareness and to raise generations of knowledgeable, confident, and socially involved young citizens. Young people. It was Winston Churchill who said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Learn history. Know the facts. Listen to the testimonies of Holocaust survivors and war veterans. Honor the memory of the righteous among the nations who risked their own lives to save Jews during the war. Do the right thing and contribute your share to making this world a better place.
Thank you very much, Consul General Bahram. It's now my pleasure to introduce Bel Jarnewski. Bel is the director of the Freeman Family Foundation Holocaust Education Center of the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada and is the current president of the Manitoba Multi-Faith Council. Since 2013, She has served on Canada's delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Her book, called Voices of Winnipeg Holocaust Survivors, documents the stories of 73 local survivors. Belle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Clint. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to represent the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada for this important commemoration. Each year, the Jewish Heritage Centre reaches thousands of Manitoba students and educators with our programs and presentations on teaching and learning about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. COVID, of course, has dramatically affected the way we go about this. And thanks to a project initiated several years ago in partnership with the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, we have an important collection of video testimony of local survivors, which we are making available to educators for their use in classrooms. Accompanying the videos are treasured items from our archival collection, which in the absence of in-person presentations, provide rich snapshots of the pre-war and post-war lives of our survivors. Today, we are confronted with a resurgence of anti-Semitism and an attempt in some countries to distort the historical narrative in an effort to deny complicity and collaboration. With the number of first-person witnesses to this tragic chapter in human history growing ever smaller each year, it is incumbent on us and on future generations to carry their torch, to ensure that we teach our students how to think critically and reflectively on this subject. It is an essential element in teaching about human rights and genocide prevention. Today, I'm honored to introduce one of our precious survivor volunteers who will be introducing tonight's film. Stefan Carter was born Stefan Andrzej Reicher in Warsaw, Poland on March 25, 1928. He is a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto, rescued by the unstinting efforts of his two cousins who took care of him in the Aryan part of Warsaw, including arranging shelter for him at a number of Polish Christian homes. These brave individuals have been recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations. Carter would later immigrate to Canada and become a renowned vascular specialist, an author, and a Shoah educator who has given so generously of his time, speaking to many high school and university students in seminars, interfaith, and other events, including at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. When he retired in 2003, Stefan was one of two recipients of the first annual St. Boniface Heart Care Award, recognized for having established his research of vascular diseases in the vascular laboratory. In retirement, Dr. Carter renewed a passion for music that originated in Poland. He is the author of two books, From Warsaw to Winnipeg, A Personal Tale of Two Cities, and also Mozart, a meditation on his life and mysterious death. I'm also pleased to introduce Dr. Daniel Stone, who will be moderating a discussion with Stefan after the film. Daniel Stone is a professor emeritus of history at the University of Winnipeg, where he taught East European and Holocaust history. He has published widely on topics in European and North American, Polish, and Jewish history. He is past president of the Jewish Heritage Centre of Western Canada. Thank you, and over to you, Stefan.
Good afternoon. Bonsoir. Dobry wieczór and shalom. It was last spring that I first realized that the date of November 15th, 2020 will mark the 80th anniversary of the sealing of the Warsaw Ghetto. And I recalled that 80 years earlier, I was in the spring of 1940, I was living in the Nazi-occupied Warsaw in our apartment, not far from the intersection of two major thoroughfares, Nowy Świat, that is New World Street, and Aleje Jerozolimskie, or Jerusalem Avenue, about a block from where the British Embassy used to be located. My family was assimilated, and our lives were still relatively normal. As Jews, we had to wear an armband with a blue Star of David, and there were restrictions and attacks on Jewish people. As a youngster, I was not aware of some of them. I had a private tutor who taught me grade 8 subjects because German authorities ordered that all schools be closed. I was able to go out and visit friends elsewhere in the city, though I was aware of my mother's anxiety whenever I ventured out to see them. What I was not aware of at that time was that the Nazis already ordered that brick walls be built across the streets to encircle an area not far from city center where the majority of Jewish people lived. Close to 400,000 of Jewish people, more than 25% of the city population, were forced into an area less than 1.5 square miles, equivalent to less than 2.5% of the city area. That was to become the Warsaw Ghetto, the urban epicenter of the Holocaust. The Jewish population of Warsaw was the largest in Europe and second largest in the world. In October 1940, the Germans declared the area surrounded by the brick walls to be the Jewish residential district. And in October 1940, they issued an order that all Jewish people in Warsaw and the vicinity must move into that area under the penalty of death, and the non-Jewish people who lived there must move out no later than November 15th. As the deadline was approaching, crowds of people carrying their luggage, some pulling carts, some in horse-drawn wagons loaded with their possessions, were trekking in and out of the district. We moved in to an apartment of friends on Pavia or Peacock Street. From the windows, I could see the walls of the notorious Pawiak prison, where Nazis brought Aryan and Polish people throughout the occupation before they executed them. It was not known whether we will be able to leave the ghetto during the day to shop or visit. When we woke up on November 16th, the ghetto was sealed. We were trapped, and I remember a heavy, foreboding feeling in my chest. Only later did it become apparent what was yet to come. The visionary historian of the ghetto, Emanuel Ringelblum, wrote, "The news came like a bolt from the blue. There were now posts of the German, Polish, and Jewish policemen who controlled everyone's right to cross. The market halls turned out to be inaccessible to Jewish women, bread and other products ran out immediately, and the new era was ushered in by an orgy of high prices. Chaim Kaplan, in his journal from the Warsaw Ghetto, wrote, "We have entered a new phase of life. It's difficult to imagine the panic that it caused in the Jewish district. We suddenly realized that we are isolated from the world, expelled from the human society." That was a seminal event in the unfolding trajectory of the events of the Holocaust. The film Memories of the Warsaw Ghetto was conceived and co-directed by Dr. Eugene Bergman, the youngest of three sons of the Bergman family from Poznań, a city in Western Poland. Their experiences during the war were mind-boggling. Dr. Bergman's father and the oldest brothers were shot dead on the first day of the Warsaw Uprising of the Polish Home Army in 1944. In the early days of the war, Eugene, diminutive Genio, was hit on the head by a German soldier with a rifle butt. When he woke up from a coma after 3 days, he was completely deaf. He miraculously survived and immigrated to the United States together with his other brother and mother. Despite never having heard a word of English, he became professor of English at Godelet University for the Education of the Deaf in Bethesda, Maryland. The film melds together acted scenes from the life in the Warsaw Ghetto and the experiences of the Bergman family. It contains archival footage, interviews with Dr. Bergman shot near the Holocaust Center in the museum, drawings by Dr. Bergman's talented artist wife, Claire, narrative and sign language.
Memories of the Warsaw Ghetto. Second World War breaks out. German army attacks Poland. Grand Synagogue, Poznań, Poland, 1939.
get the girls for tonight. I want at least 2. Sure. It would be good, you know?
When the war came to Poland, I was only 9 years old.
What girl? Me? I'm not sleeping alone tonight. Get the girls. I'm not sleeping with you. You get the girls.
Before, like many kids, I felt nothing.
No. What? See if you can actually make it go forward this time.
Until the war became personal to me.
No, please.
This film is also about my experiences during World War II.
When the German soldiers were approaching my hometown, the prison doors opened. The criminals were chasing the Jews. They were beating them.
Ah, boy.
I'm in a hurry. What do you want?
Brother. Hey.
Hi.
New boot.
No, these are old.
New stick. Try new boot to my stick.
A crowd formed around them, and they were all watching. Not one helped.
Give me money. Ghetto!
In November 1940, the Germans ordered a ghetto established in Warsaw, too. The Jews were ordered to build a brick wall around the ghetto. The wall was some 10 feet tall. It was topped with shards of glass designed to lacerate and injure anyone attempting to climb over it.
In the fall of 1940, the Germans decreed that all Jews in Warsaw must move into a ghetto. but it was already full. Luckily, my grandparents already lived there and offered us a place to stay.
Come in. Take that. Come in.
When we arrived in Warsaw, I was so happy to meet and see our relatives.
You know what? I'm going to be a Jewish police officer.
Is everything all right?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
They helped us a lot.
Stop.
But no one knew what would happen in the future. At its peak, the ghetto was home to 450,000 people, all packed into that miniature enclave. Jews from Germany and other countries were also sent to the ghetto. These foreign Jews knew no Polish and had no relatives or friends there. They died off quickly, unaccustomed to the overcrowding and filth.
My liberator tutor. He was a German Jewish professor. She used to teach in Berlin School for the Deaf.
Let me see. Right.
What?
I know. Club.
You got it. Right. I didn't mean that. I mean, I didn't mean that.
Before my mother left, she told me to give you bread.
But I just ate lunch before I came here. You're a dear boy. You got heart. Your mama and papa should be very proud of you.
Months later, I saw my teacher sitting on the street wearing a beggar's rags. What could I do to help him when my own family barely had enough to eat? I walked right on past him as if I had not seen him.
There was no room for deportees in the apartments, so they were housed in unheated synagogues and schools. These homeless people were forced into the ghetto after it had already exceeded capacity, and were therefore the first to die.
Hello, everybody! You are equal!
Abram Rubinstein, the mad clown of the ghetto.
You're equal!
All are equals, the cry of the madman, prophesies that all ghettoites, rich or poor, with social status or without, would meet the same fate, death. He also shouted, "Hitler, kaput!" and the Germans guffawed instead of killing him on the spot because he was a lunatic in a clown.
Get out of here.
The daily bread ration was 20 grams. That was like one slice of bread or less than an ounce. Sometimes also a potato. No butter, no milk, nothing else than maybe a quarter of a moldy cabbage. On that kind of food, people died like flies.
There were those food snatchers. In the ghetto, there were some food stores that offered anything you wanted for your money. Even things like locks. Outside on the street, people were dying from starvation. A young man snatched the package, tore it open, fell to the ground, and started to eat its contents frantically. Other people were kicking the snatcher while the woman was screaming. He kept eating the food, ignoring the kicks. Things like that you will never forget.
Out! Out!
I'm sorry, he was too quick for me.
It was butter. It's gone now. My mother. She's gone. Last year.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I have to go. My father's sick.
Wait. I expect to have some butter later. I can share it with you. Please. It'll be my pleasure.
It's so kind of you.
Wait. What is your name? I'm Boris.
Miriam. No, better. Maricia.
Maricia. Can I see you again?
Maybe.
Notice the sign in German and Polish. It says, plague area, transit only permitted. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
The Germans claimed that they established the ghetto to protect the Gentiles from the Jewish plague. And indeed, a plague broke out in the ghetto. It was typhoid fever. When there is so little living space and too many people to share it, disease erupts. Especially as soap, toothpaste, and the like were hardly available.
Please, sir, don't stand. It's all right.
Father, this is Boris. He has a surprise for you. Boris, this is my father, David Eisenstadt.
So you're a cop. Why are you here?
Father, Boris is a good man.
Good? For who?
He may be a cop, but he has a good heart.
Perhaps I should go. This isn't a good time.
No, stay. Father, he can be trusted. He's helped me once, and he's helped a lot of people in the ghetto. He even brought you butter.
Butter? Please, sit.
Thank you. I know how you feel. I am just as sick of my fellow cops as you are. I stayed because I hope to help my people in some way.
I'll prepare some tea. Sorry, it's only nettle tea.
It's my favorite.
They just kept dying, and the bodies accumulated on the sidewalk. Everywhere there were the beggars, emaciated, wearing shreds of clothing. The only industries that thrived in the ghetto were the laundries and sewing rooms for washing and repairing the same clothes again and again. And, of course, the funeral homes for coping with the soaring death rate. The worst, the most pitiful, were the child beggars.
With woebegone faces, some crying, "Rachmones," have pity on me, they huddled on the sidewalks, shivering in the bone-chilling cold.
Some subsisted on sales of slices of bread. One slice of bread cost about 5 zlotys. The average monthly earnings of those lucky enough to have a job at all amounted to 50 zlotys. You do the math. People were working for 10 slices of bread per month.
In one way or another, most Ghettoites managed to survive, always hungry, plagued by the cold, living off of what was previously rejected as garbage.
What are you doing here?
Oh, look, I'm just waiting for something.
I don't care. Go. Leave. Go. My papers? All right. Thank you.
Let's get it.
Hey, come here. What's this?
Bottle of liquor. Nothing illegal about liquor in the ghetto.
Oh, you're right about that. Go.
Sit down. Take a look at it. It's pretty nice, huh? All right. What you got for teeth? Open your mouth. Let me see your teeth. Gold teeth. There you go. Scooch forward a little bit. We're gonna get that tooth right out of there for you. Wrong tooth.
What?
Open your mouth. Let me see what's up in there. Open your mouth. There it is. There it is. We're gonna do this again. Here we go. Up, up. There we go. All right. We, sir, have a deal. Yeah, you're gonna need this. Take a swig. Not too much, that stuff's expensive. We're doing business with you. See you next time.
There was a large core of people who somehow managed to survive by selling their possessions.
Before the war, it cost 1 cent for a slice of bread. In the ghetto, they charged $5 for 1 slice of bread. Smugglers climbing the wall. What kept the ghetto dwellers alive was food smuggling. Ringed by the wall and cordoned off by ready-to-shoot sentries, the ghetto was nevertheless remarkably porous. Milk for the ghetto babies. Not even the death penalty kept the smugglers away. The rewards were too great. Starving people were ready to pay anything to satiate their hunger.
My father was a food trader. He lived under a false name on the Polish side. Once a week he would cross over into the ghetto. He brought the whole family food, which kept us alive.
It's for me.
No food. Make an exception this one time.
Go. I'm quitting the police.
I understand. And I know why you feel that way.
This whole Jewish autonomy thing was a joke. Germans can just come and go and shoot whoever they want to.
Without your help, I can no longer smuggle food to my family. You know what that means? That's like a death sentence for you.
He operated as a lone wolf. He avoided the organized gangs. These gangs were formed by underworld figures. They amassed fortunes with ease and spent them just as spontaneously by carousing in high-priced nightclubs. Yet, had it not been for these smugglers, the ghetto dwellers would have all died of starvation in the first year. The nightclubs of the ghetto offered many types of music, including the Argentine tango.
Nice. So here's the deal. 90 pounds of meat into the ghetto. It's all because of you, Heinz.
There's your share, and your share, and...
Enjoy it while it lasts.
What's that supposed to mean?
They take you to a place, they gas you. Every man, every woman, every child. All of the ghettoites.
That's not possible.
Just you wait. You wait. Our Fuhrer has a way of keeping his promises. Next stop, Treblinka.
That German. He's just a drunk. Doesn't know what he's talking about. He's talking about that gassing.
No idea.
To engage in business with the Germans was dangerous. One moment they clicked glasses with you, laughing, and the next they shot you for the fun of it. Posters advertising nightclub and theater performances, along with appeals to help starving children. That hardy core would not live on bread alone. The posters on this Morris column reflected the hunger of the Ghettoites for preserving Jewish spiritual and moral values and avoiding demoralization. In this doomed community, Jewish culture managed to flourish despite starvation and disease. During the lifetime of the Warsaw Ghetto, from 1940 until 1942, at least 5 theaters were open, offering a variety of operettas, comedies, skits, satires, and ballet performances. There was even a Jewish symphony orchestra. Ah, Abraham Goldfaden's opera at the Noe Azazel Theater.
I was one of those attending the performance of that opera in the ghetto. As I remember it, the theater was packed. It being very cold, the audience sat wrapped in their overcoats. When the curtain finally fell, they responded with loud applause. To see that opera was a welcome relief from the daily fear, hunger, and stench. The ancient Israel that served as the backdrop reminded me that we, despised and rejected Jews, had once a country and a state of our own. It inspired me with pride in Jewish dignity and independence.
This is a poster for a ballet performance. You can see people lining up in front to buy potatoes. And then there were the clandestine classes.
My brother Dadek attended one such class. In the ghetto, there existed a ramified system of underground high school and university classes. They were taught by eminent scientists, sociologists, and mathematicians. The lecturers were the best of their kind. After all, the ghetto was not a reservation for savages. It was the compulsory home of Poland's most eminent intellectuals and artists.
Over 50 underground periodicals were published in Yiddish, Hebrew, and Polish.
Despite everything, culture flourished in the ghetto. Ghetto inhabitants even organized weddings in their efforts to live a life as normal as possible. A family celebration, even in the worst of times.
Oh, wow. How did you manage to make this?
I just mashed up some rutabagas, and then I sliced a carrot and put it on top.
You like? Yes.
Wedding cakes made of turnips. Such were the modest pleasures of life in the ghetto.
A bit too sweet. You've added to my saccharin. But wait, I have a present for you.
The sugar shortages of World War I and II resulted in saccharin's widespread use, even though it had no food value.
Flour. This is wonderful. But how do I thank you?
But their enjoyment, too, is mingled with the ever-present oppressive dread of death by German hand.
Stick it out, and one day we'll be freed of this oppression.
Sarah, that's easy for you to talk. You have a husband who lives outside of the ghetto, and he supports you. But I and my family, we have nothing. We are doomed. We can't even escape because we look too Jewish. We've sold all of our valuables. We have nothing left.
There's that gnawing feeling in the stomach with nothing to eat. Your legs become swollen with water.
Winter is coming, but we will die from hunger before we even die from the cold.
Getting up and walking requires even more effort. One feels so lightheaded that he has to lean against a wall to keep from falling down. Ultimately, one falls down and lacks the strength to get up. He eventually falls asleep and never wakes. Then suddenly, the world collapses.
Deportations to death camps begin. Cowering men, women, and children are guarded by German sentries. This is Umschlagplatz, the place from where trains with Jews departed for Treblinka.
Uncle, please. The Germans rounded up thousands of children from orphanages and patients from hospitals and sent them by train to camps in the east. What kind of work can children and the sick do?
What do you think? There are no work details there. Our people are being killed by the thousands in gas chambers when they get to Treblinka.
That's impossible. The Germans would never dare do that.
Treblinka escapees told us everything. They witnessed our people being whipped and chased all the way from the trains to the gas chambers. There's no more doubt now. The Germans are executing the destruction of the entire Jewish people.
No. That is not right.
You are not the only skeptic. The ghetto leaders also refuse to believe it. It is not possible. The Germans wouldn't do such things. They are a cultured people. Those are the things they've been saying. It is too horrifying to believe, so they refuse to believe it. They are in denial.
Historically, in times of war, young people living in slums are vulnerable to moral rot. The Warsaw Ghetto was one big wartime slum. By all rights, Jewish youths living there should have become juvenile delinquents, hoodlums, thieves. These high-minded young people were different.
My heart contracts with rue when I recall these beautiful youths, their steely courage, and their burning desire not to die on their knees.
For them, to fight was their last desire in life.
I admire you. Sometimes it takes the next generation to see past the deluded views of its predecessors.
Let us not offer our throats to be slashed like sheep. We must fight.
Teenagers will confront what we elders no longer can do. How many will fight?
There are 500 of us young Zionists left. Had we known before, we would number in the thousands. So many of our best have already been massacred. And it is a torture to think of how we allowed so many helpless people to be seized and killed. But we are now ready. The time is not yet, but we have been stockpiling weapons. We have handguns, grenades.
500 people with handguns and grenades against thousands of professional soldiers with machine guns and tanks and cannon?
We are doomed either way. Let us not die on our knees begging for our lives. If we must die, then we will die with dignity. It is our last desire to stand up and fight.
Give me a gun.
Oh, Boris, still there talking?
Yes. Oh, I forgot. I had a cigarette for you.
Oh.
It's my last one. You should take it, though.
Oh, thank you. Good day.
Give me the gun. I will fight.
Then welcome to the cause.
Go. Go now.
These youths had high morale, bonds of personal comradeship, and a shared faith in a new, better world. The German terror tactics bolstered their spirit instead of crushing it. It produced a desire for revenge. Finally, they rebelled.
The Germans raised settlements one by one. A place was not journalists. We as dumb neighbors had to hide out in the cells before the raiders would come at dawn.
Sned! Sned! What? Why do you resist? Don't you know that they are taking you?
I know very well where. To Jablanka, to be gassed. You. I'm going back to them.
Why? What are you doing?
To join my father.
Don't go to your death. Stay with me. He will die happy knowing that you are still alive.
Alive how long? If the Germans don't kill me today, they'll kill me tomorrow.
You don't know. You can still survive it all. With me.
Even if I took that chance, I will never forgive myself for leaving my father in his deepest hour of need. The wound in me would be so deep, it would never heal. No, the life you offer would be poisoned with remorse.
Up! What is this? Snell! 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 Sned! 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 For you. I had to go to see to my parents now. I'll be back soon, okay? Be ready to go. No suitcases, just summer clothes. I'll be back soon.
Sarah, leave with the children as soon as you can. Do not go to the wagons or train. That means certain death. You know where to find me. Pesach. Dedek, get ready to leave. Now.
I'm not going. It is my duty to stay with the movement.
Your duty? Your duty is with your family.
There is a higher duty.
I have to leave, but I'll be back tomorrow.
What for? So we can spend more time living here like rats?
Come on, Papa. The Germans threatened us Jewish cops that if we didn't get a quota of 5 people today, they would deport us instead. Only they didn't say 5 people, they said 5 noggins.
Did you get your quota?
No. And I'm not going to.
We'll go.
Yes, we'll go. What's the point of living like that? We'll go. You're young, you still have a chance.
The raid is over for today. Sarah. Are you ready to cross the wall?
Dadek won't go. How can I leave him?
Dadek, you must go.
No. I need to stay and fight.
Without you, your mother and brother would be caught. Your Polish are flawless. Without you, they will not make it. You must go with them.
Escaping to the Aryan or Gentile part of Warsaw was something that most ghetto dwellers lacked the courage to do. Only a few daring individuals who spoke fluent Polish without a Yiddish accent and did not look too Semitic dared to venture outside the wall.
Very well then. I will go.
Come.
What is this?
While the guards are busy with the fake corpse, the Bergmans escape across the border.
As far as my experience, in 1943, I had already escaped from the ghetto with my family. But at nights, from my window in the Polish part of the city, we could see the flames burning in the ghetto. And during the daytime, you would see the black smoke from my window. And that was my experience. Because if I was inside the ghetto at that time, I would not be alive right now. The revolt broke out in January 1943, and these teenagers dared attempt what their elders shrank from. They ignited a revolt that spurred subsequent uprisings in Białystok, Vilna, and smaller ghettos.
It was the first armed revolt in German-occupied Europe, and the first Jewish revolt since Bar Kokhba 2,000 years ago. There was house-to-house fighting, room-to-room fighting. The ghetto was the Jewish Alamo. To avoid further losses from such close-quarter fighting, the Germans stopped attacking and instead shelled the ghetto, set it afire, and dynamited and razed it.
It took the Germans more than 2 months to suppress Jewish resistance, longer than it took them to conquer Poland and then France. Even so, the Jewish revolt was much more than that, given the desperate courage and idealism of the fighters.
It was an unequal struggle. The Jews were bound to lose. These Jewish youths knew that their promising lives were over. And now they desired only a worthy death. And leaving a memory that someday would be honored. What was most memorable about them was the controlled intensity of their feelings, the calm and determination with which they moved, as if in the possession of a great secret. A carousel was set up by some enterprising spirit right next to the ghetto wall. A Polish poet, Czesław Miłosz, who felt deeply for the Jews and witnessed that grotesque scene, wrote a poem about it. In Warsaw, by the Sky Carousel, one clear spring evening, to the strains of a carnival tune, the bright melody drowned the salvos from the ghetto wall. And couples were flying high in the cloudless sky. At times, wind from the burning would drift dark ashes along. And riders on the carousel caught petals in midair. That same hot wind blew open the skirts of the girls, and the crowds were laughing on that beautiful Warsaw Sunday. Those dying here, the lonely, forgotten by the world, our tongue becomes for them the language of an ancient planet.
Back!
After the war, Bronnik met a former neighbor who had witnessed the execution of his father in Ghetto and lived to tell it. Boris died fighting in the uprising. From July to September of 1942, a total of 300,000 Jews were transported from the ghetto to the gas chambers in Treblinka.
No, 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 please, please.
He hit me with the butt of his rifle in the head, and I was knocked out. That's how I became deaf.
This is the essence of the Holocaust. First, the implacable killers deride us, insult us, harass and torment us. Then they hurl us from windows onto pavement, shoot us, gas us, massacre us alive. But the twig is green, even as the tree is dead. We survivors pay homage to a vanished civilization.
Before the war, over 3 million Jews lived in Poland. Only 100,000 survived. Boris, 1940. Uncle Boris. In the end, he gave his life so that we could have ours. Genio, 1940. Look at how young I was. Dr. Eugene Bergman. This is me today, one of the last living survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto. This film is dedicated to the family of Eugene Bergman and the other 6 million victims of the Holocaust, including 450,000 martyred inhabitants of the Warsaw Ghetto.
As the film winds down, I'd like to, if you don't mind, say a few personal words before we move on to the real commentator, Stephen Carter. I grew up in New York City, a short half block from Riverside Drive Park, where I played as a child and often stopped to look at a stone plaque built into the pavement of the 84th Street Mall. The plaque, dedicated by Mayor O'Dwyer on October 19, 1947, announced that here is the spot for the American Memorial to the heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto Battle, April-May 1943, and to the 6 million Jews of Europe martyred in the name of human liberty. This monument never went up, but the message sank in and helped draw me to an academic career studying Polish and Polish Jewish history. When I went to Warsaw as an exchange student in 1963, I was placed in a dormitory on Mordechai Anielewicz Street, 1 block from the Ghetto Monument. Incidentally, for you travelers, Anielewicz Street in the 1960s was a small north-south street and not the large east-west street that it is today. Warsaw had only been partially rebuilt then, and I remember seeing a bombed out or burned out building, the last location of the Judenrat or Jewish Council, across the large, open, and undeveloped plaza. In my first research leave, 14 years later, my wife and I rented an apartment on Novolipki Street, once a major ghetto thoroughfare with trolley tracks running down the middle. Emanuel Ringelblum, the founder of the secret ghetto archive, buried the first third of his archive under a workshop on that street to hide it from the Germans. After the war, however, Novolipki became a quiet, tree-lined street with modest apartment buildings standing 5 or 6 feet above the street level because they rested on piles of rubble left from the ghetto's destruction. Shortly after we arrived, our 5-year-old son was admitted to preschool number 125 across Novolipki, where we could see him playing in the schoolyard from our bedroom window. During his first week of school, his class took a field trip, walking quite a long distance to the Ghetto Monument, to Paviak Prison, where Emanuel Ringelblum was tortured and executed, and finally to a modest statue honoring the Soviet liberators. While I spent my time in the former Warsaw Ghetto well after World War II, Dr. Stephen Carter lived the real thing. As Beljanevsky told you earlier, Dr. Carter is a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto who became a distinguished physician in Canada. He has spoken widely about his experiences and written a very interesting memoir, From Warsaw to Winnipeg, A Tale of Two Cities, as well as a fine book on one of his passions, music, especially Mozart. I had the pleasure of spending time with Stefan as a fact checker and discussant when he was working on his memoir. We have a few questions now, and let me remind you that you can send in more via the Q&A section. Let me pull them up. Stefan, the question not covered in the film, could the Allies have done more to interfere with the machinery of the Holocaust?
Yes, one of the debates that has been going on since the war was the request by Jewish people transmitted by the Polish courier Jan Karski to the West. They wanted the Allies to bomb the railway to Auschwitz because there were still thousands of Hungarian Jews being transported to Auschwitz, and this never happened, whereas it really should have, because the Allies had the command of the skies by then, and it could have been done. Why it didn't, there are various reasons why it wouldn't happen, but I guess people had various excuses, or there are factors why President Roosevelt was not pressed harder. He was able to send a raid on Budapest, actually, in the latter part of the war, and he could have done it.
Thank you. I think I'll skip to a personal question that came in. How do you, Dr. Carter, not live with hatred in your heart after these experiences?
Well, there is, I think, as other people more eloquently said, there's potential for both good and evil within each person and every group of people. And I naively perhaps thought soon after the war that because I and millions were victims of intolerance, that I should become tolerant, and I have attempted to do that since.
Do you find that, let me amplify that, do you find that survivors in Winnipeg and elsewhere are bitter, forgiving, tolerant?
I think it differs. There's a lot of differences among people, and I can understand that there are survivors who have nightmares to this day, and I guess they have a form of post-traumatic stress disorder, which I guess many of us, or certainly survivors and soldiers, have experienced. But some people are able to move on, and while they remember, as I do certainly, they also go on with their lives and create new families, new life, and experience life to the fullest.
Thank you. More general question, or at least more not closely tied to the film. Have the recent political changes within the Polish government made it more difficult to fully educate audiences on the Holocaust? Continuing, I understand that the PIS, that is the Law and Justice Party, the government of Poland, specifically is very sensitive about the dissemination of this material, as well as of the existence of anti-Semitism on the part of Polish citizens and the pre-war government, which ultimately seeped into the wartime climate.
So your question is again?
Well, there's been the current government, as you know very well, has taken a very strong stand on the heroism of the Polish people and the help that Poles gave to Jews during the war, some of which, of course, you personally experienced.
Yes. Yes.
But there are other limitations.
Well, of course, the government of Poland and other countries, Hungary, and so on, and actually all countries tend to be seen in a good light, which is a natural thing for human beings to, when they're accused of something, to circle the wagon, deny it at first, sometimes concoct tangled webs of something that's completely imaginary. But there are other people who resist that, and we must all do that and speak the truth and talk about what has happened. And there are indeed groups in Poland. There is a Center for Holocaust Research who do excellent research about both good things and bad things that Polish people did. There were certainly the righteous Gentiles, without whom myself, my family, and a large proportion of those Jewish people who survived in Poland would not have, without the courageous, heroic deeds. And even now, I understand there are protests in Poland against laws trying to abolish abortion, which is sort of remarkable in a very Catholic country. So there is this constant interplay of good and evil going on, including in Poland.
Let me combine a couple of questions here. Here's a comment more than a question. An amazing testament to human cruelty and what we are possible of doing when our vision is clouded with ignorance. Education is the key, as well as support for those who have witnessed, lived, participated, and been affected by the Holocaust. And then someone else, an actual question. Now this is skipped up. My seems to have disappeared in some strange way. But anyway, the question, what can you possibly say to the recent rioters in Washington, especially people like that, people who are wearing an Camp Auschwitz t-shirt, and the racists and white supremacists storming the Capitol? How did you feel, and what can possibly be done to move them in a better direction?
Well, yes, indeed. I guess it seems to be that almost half of the United States population is living in an imaginary parallel universe. I think I would like to quote, if you permit me, what Dr. Regine King said at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights on the occasion of commemoration of 20 years anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. She said that preservation of the stories of men's inhumanity to men is essential to counterbalance denials and hatred. That is because, as history shows, humanity does not learn from its past mistakes, and the good and the evil within our species are in a state of constant counterbalance. So what needs to happen is that it needs to be sensitivity training for police and for indeed everybody. And we have to repeat the stories of what happened, which also was done by the Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2019 in Auschwitz. She said that those stories of survivors are part of German history and they should be told and retold.
Another comment along the same lines, do you feel disappointed that despite all that is done to perpetuate the memory of the Holocaust and attempts to educate the public about the Holocaust, that Holocaust denial appears more resilient than ever and that anti-Semitism is flourishing?
Yeah, of course I'm disappointed. I visited Treblinka in 1988, I believe, and I remember the stones with the words "never again" in 5 different languages. And I used to sort of end my talks with that. But other people, including a professor from University of Chicago, years ago said that never again means only that Hitler will never again kill Jews in 1940s. We need to keep those stories and we need to do sensitivity sessions. It's very difficult, I think, for most of us to avoid our unconscious bias, which we all have, and bring our rational, conscious thoughts to the fore. We just need to try and doing the sensitivity training on and on. It's an ongoing process, is what I think.
Question in a different direction. Have we adequately recognized and dealt with the effect of trauma on the second generation, the children of Holocaust survivors? Perhaps you could broaden that a little bit and say, talk, if you care to, about what you told your children or what other people told their children and how this gets dealt with.
Yeah, certainly. I understand that learned psychologists have dealt with this issue, and certainly my children or second generation, third generation are all affected in a certain way, and it's not easy for them. So yes, I did speak with them. They know my story. They read my book. I am available to answer the questions when they are ready to do so. That's, I don't know how we can do it better.
Yeah, in my work in this area, I found, as you've indicated, of course, there are lots of people and everybody reacts differently based on their personality and their experiences. Some Holocaust survivors didn't talk to their children for decades or never talked to their children. In fact, I talked to one educator who very early in the educational process, and as Holocaust education goes, that is 1970s, she said that the first time a Holocaust survivor spoke to his child was when he spoke to a class in which his child was a student. In other words, he was unable to talk to the child directly and had to go indirectly.
Yes, I guess the usual thing is what happened after the war is that survivors did not talk about what happened. Some people didn't believe them, and they were busy getting on with their lives. It was only after Eichmann trial in Jerusalem was one of the events that sort of spurred on survivors to start telling their stories. I'm not sure, but I believe in Winnipeg, the Holocaust Awareness Committee became more active around 1970s and on when we started talking. And now, of course, there are thousands of testimonies in the foundation in University of Southern California, where one can access individual testimonies of survivors of Holocaust as well as of other genocides and other educational endeavors in Winnipeg, in Warsaw, everywhere in Germany.
Very specific question here about, well, was there ever a list kept of the names of all the people who lived and died and were deported to death camps in the Warsaw Ghetto? It's hard to get these things right off. So in the Warsaw, what kind of lists were there of people in the Warsaw Ghetto and their fate?
I really don't know. It seems to me inconceivable that the chaotic, in a sense, process of taking Jewish people in cattle cars to Treblinka, that there would be a record of it. I'm not sure if that there is. Is that what your question was?
That's the question, and you know, from reading many history books, as both you and I have, no, there's no list. There's a population list in the Warsaw Ghetto kept by the ghetto authorities, but it was impossible to keep it completely systematically, and there was certainly no record kept of who was pushed onto the cattle cars off to Treblinka and who died in the streets, as we saw in the 100,000 people who died of starvation and malnutrition in that first winter in the Warsaw Ghetto, not to mention, of course, all the other ghettos in Poland.
Yes, I agree. I guess there are some things are known individually. For example, there was a well-known writer in the Warsaw Ghetto who had two little children and couldn't run away with her friends who were able to do that. She was loaded on a train. Somebody who escaped from the train, which was a rare and very courageous feat, knew that she died in the train, trampled, because those cattle cars were severely overcrowded with hundreds of victims being taken to Treblinka. He escaped, and he knew that she died on the way to Treblinka.
Yes, and the train trip to Treblinka was relatively short at 4 to 5 hours compared to the numerous Jews who were shipped from Greece, from Italy, from France, and that took several days.
Yes, indeed. I guess all the trains went to the camps, Nazi camps, which they built on the territory of pre-war Poland.
A question oriented towards Israel and Palestine. Respectfully, I ask, this correspondent writes, are not similar atrocities continuing in Palestine to this day?
I think atrocities are are occurring throughout the world. In the Middle East, there is the Israeli-Palestinian issue. There is Shiite versus Sunni Arabs. There are things going on in China and Tibet, and you can all over the place. That's the unfortunate part of human nature. I believe the Holocaust gives us a window into human nature, and in a way is relevant to what's happening today, whether it the recent events in Washington, D.C., or Middle East and elsewhere.
A question that's more directly on the Holocaust itself. Only a small proportion of the perpetrators have met with justice. What can we learn from that?
Well, yeah, there were the Nuremberg trials soon after the war, where the highest perpetrators were judged and sentenced. I guess so many of my understanding is that so many of the German population were part of the Nazi party that it was impossible to put them all in jail because there would be nobody to run the country. So many of them got off lightly. Some trials have resumed later into this millennium, actually, into very old men. But I guess that's coming to an end.
In the film, there are many newsreel sections on the ghetto, not newsreels, but Nazi films, actually. Is that how you remember seeing people on the street, people in the crowds?
In the ghetto? Oh, yes, certainly.
Yes.
I saw the dead people, some covered with newspaper, being taken to the mass graves on the border of the ghetto. And as one of the films, which was, I believe, showed by Germans, shows that people sort of walked by, their attention being turned inwards. One got on with one's life. I guess some people were privileged, being better, I think, better off. I was among them. There was this cultural life that the man who was in the movie was the other brother of Dr. Bergman, who survived the war. He was an amazing man who passed away a couple of years ago. A book about him has just been published. Did I don't know, did I answer the question or?
Yes, did you go to any of the symphony concerts or the theater?
Yes, I did attend a concert of Jewish Symphony Orchestra. I remember one of the works played was the Unfinished Symphony by Schubert, and I attended the secret high school classes of my school, Spójniach, which was school for Jewish boys that I attended before the war and in secret classes during the war. And my professor of history was a good violinist, and he played in the violin section. So I attended one concert.
What was the food situation like in your family? The film emphasized the shortage of rations, the difficulties of getting anything.
Yeah, the food rations, of course, were less than 200 calories a day, than even less. Nobody could survive that, and the only reason that people survived was the smuggling and bribing the guards, the little smugglers who often paid with their life or severe beating, at least, were essential to survival in the ghetto. My father was involved with manufacture of artificial honey from sugar, which occasionally supplanted the rations, but it was inadequate. So occasionally we were a bit hungry. I think I was better off than large proportion of the Jewish people who did not have the means and who couldn't eat, who died from hunger and from typhus transmitted by lice.
How is the housing situation for you and your family?
Well, I guess the ghetto was overcrowded. It's an amazing thing. I guess there's been some criticism of the Jewish Council, and it's a very complex situation. But I think it is relevant to consider that in modern Warsaw, the population density is somewhere around 3 to 3,500 people per square mile. In the most populous, highest density city in the world, which is Mumbai, it's over 70,000 people per square mile. In the ghetto, it was well over 200,000 per square mile, which is an amazing thing. I think that the people, the doctors who did research, the secret school, the underground university, were able to help and control the epidemic of typhus, which actually was improving by 1942, when the great deportation of majority of the population of the ghetto occurred.
Some other questions have come in. What can we learn from the? It's a question of, well, immigration. What can we learn from the fact that many countries, including Canada, slammed their doors shut to Jews trying to escape from the Nazis in Europe?
Yeah, I guess anti-Semitism has been referred to as the longest hatred, and it has continued since the early days of the Common Era, and still continues. And of course, you are perfectly correct that many countries, including Canada, had a dismal record as far as accepting Jewish people before the war, during the war, and for the first 2 years after the war. The same is the case for the United States. It's only about 2 years after the war that Jewish people were accepted, including myself and other immigrants, to Canada, including Winnipeg.
You're in touch with people in Warsaw, especially the people who do research on the Holocaust, and also on people that you had some other connections with. So that's the context for this question, or that's my context for this question. Dr. Carter, what is your perspective on what Jewish culture and life is in Poland now? Has it persisted despite so much loss and death?
Well, there was an article in Winnipeg Free Press some years ago that there is anti-Semitism in Poland without Jews because there were very few Jews. But I understand that there is some interest in the Jewish culture. There is Jewish theater and shows with actors being non-Jews, and that the Jewish community in Warsaw is slowly increasing. That's what I understand. Yes, I've been in touch with the Polish Center for Holocaust Research, who are doing excellent research, and I understand that the database of the Warsaw Jewish and non-Jewish people is one of the best in the world, according to some university librarians.
If I may add a little bit, many of the Polish universities have programs in Jewish studies and specifically Holocaust studies. There are many very, very fine historians, both Jewish and especially non-Jewish, because of course there are very few Jews in Poland. So there are many world-leading historians of the Holocaust who do terrific research and write wonderful books and articles on the subject. If you go, well, I haven't been in Poland for a few years, but whenever I go into a bookstore, I take a look to see what's published. And I remember checking a big bookstore fairly recently, checking the Jewish section, finding about 40 books that were translated from English, things like IBM and the Holocaust, and about 60 books that were written in Polish at the time in the place. So there's quite a fascination with Jewish studies and many accomplishments.
Yes, indeed. One of the books I recently read is called East-West Street, and it's about a man, a lawyer, but he talks about two Jewish lawyers from Lviv who were instrumental in promoting the concept of crimes against humanity and the word of genocide, which were introduced into the Nuremberg trials of the Nazi criminals shortly after the war. A fascinating book.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our program today. Thank you to Dr. Stephen Carter, our wonderful moderator, Dr. Daniel Stone, all our presenters. Thank you to all of you for watching us from home. Please note that the recording of this event will be available on our Facebook page, so the CMHR Facebook page, for 24 hours after this event. It will also be posted on the YouTube channel of the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada. Thank you for participating. Please visit our website, humanrights.ca, and follow us on social media to find out about our upcoming events. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone.